Actress Michelle Trachtenberg was found dead this morning in New York City, and tributes to her are already flooding across social media. It isn't known exactly how Michelle died, but it is known that she recently received a liver transplant, so people are hypothesizing that this could have had something to do with that. Michelle started her acting career at just 3 years old, appearing in commercials, and I definitely remember her starring in a number of shows and movies when I was younger, including shows like The Adventures of Pete and Pete and Harriet the Spy. Michelle also had prominent roles in shows like Gossip Girl and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and people all over the world loved the roles that she took on and the films and TV shows that she appeared in. Now, Michelle in the past had been pretty open about some of the abuse that she faced on the sets of TV shows and movies that she worked on, and I think that this news comes as a shock to a lot of people because, like I mentioned before, she was only 39 years old. Obviously, this is really sad news and my thoughts go out to her family, but if we find anything else out, I'll be sure to update everybody on here. And yeah, this is just really sad news.
First, I'm gonna show you a picture. It's a little eerie. Do you see this?
Yes. Head, like a real life head?
Human head, yes. That head has been preserved for years now.
What?
And that head belongs to Diogo Alves, the first ever Portuguese serial killer in history from 1836 to 1840. He was killing people.
God damn.
He was originally from Spain. Eventually, he just ended up leaving to Portugal, in Lisbon, Portugal. He was a poor guy. He didn't really have money like that. He just resorted to crime, robbing, mugging people and in Portugal, there's this bridge. They call it an aqueduct, and it's 213 feet tall. So what he would do is that anybody he would see crossing by or anybody that was near, he would have them at gunpoint, bring them to that bridge, and push them off. But, like, he would rob their money, and then he would just throw them off. At the time, there was a lot of poverty, so majority of the time they thought it was just... And then also, like, when they found the bodies, it seemed like there was no form of struggle, so they automatically just said it was... So he killed 70 people.
But wait, hold...
Obviously, he was eventually caught. They managed to like catch him literally by the aqueduct and shit. They sentenced him to death and they hung him. So the scientists were like, yo, let's preserve his head.
But why?
Back in the day, you could do that. The people who would get
Decapitated?
basically, if you ever got executed, people could buy the heads. That head is still around to this day, and you can find it in the University of...
In 2015, two mechanics who were 19 and 21 were working on a wind turbine, when suddenly the turbine had a short circuit and a massive fire started. Keep in mind, they are 260 feet in the air, and the way they came up is now completely engulfed in flames. A fire team arrived quickly, but there was no way for them to get up and help them. They called a crane, but by the time it got there, it was too late. One of the men became cornered by the fire, and he had nowhere to go and no way of escaping. He basically had no other choice other than to wait for the fire to reach him. He had the horrible luck of watching his inevitable death slowly approach him. And when the flames finally reached him, he would sadly burn to death. The other man would be forced back by the flames and the thick black smoke to the point where he lost his footing and slipped off the turbine, falling 260 feet to his death. It's reported he died on impact, so he just watched the ground slowly approach as he fell. There was a photo of the two men on top of the turbine hugging as the flames surround them. It's honestly one of the saddest photos ever, especially because the two guys knew they were going to die.
Her body was found during the Gabby Petito case, and the murder case is eerily similar. It was October 2021, and Emily Jean Schwartz was just 22 years old. She was stunning and full of life. Her family described her as a beautiful, aspiring singer with an infectious personality. Now, she was super excited to celebrate her first wedding anniversary, married to Joseph Valazzo. The pair constantly posted cute couples photos like the one above to social media to celebrate and show everybody how happy they were. The pair had decided to convert a bus into a living and travel space and had been on a little road trip in the town of Bolton. Alarm bells started ringing when Joseph ended up coming home from the trip without his wife, very similar to how Brian Laundrie came home with Gabby's van but no Gabby. Emily's family were disturbed by this and reported her missing. Joseph told the family that the pair had had an argument and Emily had stormed off. But something about this just didn't feel right for Emily's family. This didn't sound like Emily's character, and why had he come home without her? Emily's mum was also alarmingly aware that there had been some DV between the pair. Emily had been a victim multiple times. Police ended up hunting for the camper van that the couple had been traveling in, and when they found it, they were absolutely horrified. In the bathroom of the camper van, Emily's dismembered body parts were recovered. Suddenly, Joseph decided to change his story. He said that he and his wife were in a polyamorous relationship, and this caused a lot of arguments between them. Infuriatingly, he tried to claim that he killed his wife in self-defense and said that his memory was hazy because he'd been so sleep-deprived. He confessed to shooting her and dismembering her body. He stated, "I have one flash of memory where I cut into her leg with a knife. It made me sick." He tried to claim that Emily had been irrational that night because she'd been drinking, but the toxicology report showed that she had no alcohol in her system whatsoever. Evidence showed that Joseph had held a pillow over her face and fired 2 bullets into her head. Following the murder, Joseph sent out numerous text messages and had made several phone calls over the course of 3 days in an attempt to cover up his crime and make it look like he was looking for his wife. Very similar to how Brian Laundrie had done this. Thankfully, he was found guilty of murder and he faces a minimum of 35 years in prison and a maximum of life. Now, I'm really aware after having watched the Gabby Petito documentary that so many more people were tragically reported missing during the Gabby Petito case. In Wyoming alone, more than 700 Native Americans were reportedly missing over the last decade. If you'd like me to cover some of these cases, please let me know.
Remember this guy?
Yeah, Chris Watts.
Yes, so I don't know if you knew, but there was actually paranormal activity happening after the murders of the wife and the kids.
The only thing that I know is that the cops caught some stuff.
Okay,
The very
yes.
first visit.
You saw it?
Yo.
Yeah, bro.
Something. I heard it.
That's the first video, right? The first body cam footage.
There's more?
Yes, a couple weeks, the arrest of Chris. A lot of weird shit started happening that the neighbors were reporting because the neighbor said that they have footage of somebody walking up to the house but never leaving. And when the police get there, they see that the garage lights are on. There should be no light on inside the house. And the body cam footage, you hear weird voices.
Frederick Police Department, anybody in the house?
Yes.
I heard that one.
This my dog.
You heard it?
Was that a voice?
Yes.
This my dog.
It's my daughter?
Yes.
Decomposing body of 31-year-old Gareth Williams was found inside his London flat under grotesque circumstances. Gareth, who was a brilliant MI6 and GCHQ codebreaker, had been stuffed inside a red North Face duffel bag, which was padlocked from the outside. The bag sat in his bathtub, the air inside quickly suffocating any hope of survival. No fingerprints were found on the lock, the bag, or the bathtub. No signs of forced entry, and no DNA. It was as if whoever did this had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only an eerie silence. Experts tried again and again to replicate the scenario. Multiple attempts by escape artists and forensic specialists failed to replicate it, and no one could lock themselves inside the bag without help. His apartment heater had been left on full blast, accelerating the decomposition, ensuring crucial evidence melted away before his body was ever found. Was he tortured, suffocated, poisoned? Authorities danced around the truth, first suggesting an accident, then admitting he was likely unlawfully killed. But by who? Gareth had been working in the world of deep intelligence, encrypted secrets, and covert operations, and with people who never left loose ends. Had he seen something he shouldn't have and was silenced? If so, whoever did it knew exactly how to make it look like he was never even there. This case remains one of the biggest mysteries in true crime.
We need to talk about pedophile symbols in children's movies and books for a second. So these are symbols that the FBI in the past has claimed that pedophiles use to communicate with each other. This is a known thing, and there are actually people who belong to these groups who have come out and stated that yes, these groups do align with these symbols. So take a good look, especially up here to the left. So these are some screenshots from the children's film Alina of Avalor. Do you notice any symbols right here on one of the characters? Well, some of the other symbols from that sheet are found on another one of the characters in the film. Then there's the movie The Mighty Ducks, where one of the characters' helmets not only has one of those symbols, it actually has both of them. Same character, same helmet. I mean, that's pretty strange, right? There's also the film The Flight of the Navigator, where you can clearly see this same symbol being used again and again throughout the film. And these same symbols can also be found on diapers, you can see them clearly right there, on CDs that are clearly produced for and marketed towards children, interactive books made for children like these, and they can even be observed as far back as in Pinocchio. So, what do you think? Is this all just one big coincidence? Are these commonly used symbols? Or are these symbols seen in children's films and media for a reason? I don't know, maybe it was an animator that had certain proclivities themselves that wanted to brag to people that would recognize this, that they had gotten away with getting a job working near children. Or maybe it's all just a coincidence.
Murder victim seemingly came back from the dead 22 years later. This case is full of so many twists and turns that I never saw coming. Mary Day was born in New York in February 1968. She had 2 younger sisters, and unfortunately they didn't have a very stable upbringing. Their mum Charlotte would often neglect them all, and they had been in and out of foster care. The mum ended up divorcing her first husband, which was the girl's dad, and then got married to a man called William Hewell. In a really cruel turn of events, Mary and her other sister were separated from their sister Sherry. Now, Sherry was left behind in foster care, while Mary and her other sister were reunited with Charlotte and the family. Charlotte then had another baby and the family moved to Georgia. Then she had another child who she called William Jr. So we now kind of have this new family. We have Mary and her mum and her stepdad, her original sister, just one of her original sisters, and these 2 new step-siblings. Unfortunately, Mary's dad Charles was then killed in an accident, her biological dad. So Mary was not only struggling with the grief of losing her biological dad, but something really sinister was going on in her family home. Mary was being abused by her stepdad William. Now again, Child Protective Services did have to intervene, and in 1980 Mary was once again removed and placed in foster care. I mean, how many times can this child be sort of moved in and out and taken off her family, put back in the family home? It feels like clearly there's an issue there, so maybe she should just be removed for good. Yet again, very frustratingly, after a short amount of time, Mary was placed back with her family. But bizarrely, on around the 15th of July 1981, Mary vanished into thin air. Her parents didn't report her missing, which is just so bizarre, and it seemed like local people didn't even know that she had ever existed. The parents just carried on their lives as normal with the other siblings, with no concern for where Mary was. Now, years and years went by, and still the parents never reported Mary missing. That was until Mary's sister that I mentioned, that Sherry, wanted to be reunited. In the meantime, like I said, she'd been kind of off in foster care, and then she'd been officially adopted by another family. She obviously really missed her original siblings though, and just wanted to reunite with them and reconnect with them like I think anyone would. In 1992, Sherry got back in touch with her biological mum, Charlotte. We know Charlotte's pretty problematic. She's had a lot of kids taken off her, given back to her, taken off her. She also never reported her child missing. So when Sherry reconnected with her biological mum, the mum just told her, yeah, your sister Mary ran away. Now Sherry was obviously horrified at the thought that her little sister had run away about 10 years ago and just nobody had heard from her since. She straight away went to file a missing persons report, but frustratingly, due to the time that had elapsed, police just weren't interested. It was left to Sherry to do most of the legwork. It would take years of Sherry really trying to spread the word about her missing sibling and get age progression photos, etc., for an investigation to finally be launched. Now we're skipping right over to 2002 now, so loads of time has gone by. Officers started to look back at old files of like school records and things to see whether there was any clues there as to what had happened, but Mary wasn't even enrolled in school when she vanished. Kathy, Mary's sister, told Sherry all about the night that Mary went missing. Now this really did help to shed some light on the situation. She said that they'd both stayed inside the home, her and Mary, while the others went out for food, and when they got back, William's dog seemed to be really unwell. well, and William accused Mary of poisoning the dog. Now, William then attacked Mary apparently so badly she was bleeding from her face, and that's the last time her sister saw her. Following day, she'd obviously just vanished. Now, Charlotte disturbingly burned all photos of Mary and pretended she never even existed. To be honest, hearing this, Sherry pretty much thought, okay, they murdered her. She was literally 13 years old when she vanished, and although, yeah, maybe she did run away and start a new life, it seemed very unrealistic. Charlotte had even made very weird statements about how she could hide a body and it never be found. Now, it was around this time that police did feel like they did have a murder investigation on their hands. They began interviewing the parents and they found out that they'd been financially benefiting from Mary's dad's death. They'd been claiming benefits that were intended for Mary from her late father. They were also found to have lied about loads of details to officers. William even apparently admitted that it was possible that the night that Mary vanished, the devil inside of him may have taken over and killed her. Kathy told officers that there was an area of the back garden she'd been warned never to go to. When they brought in cadaver dogs, they seemed to indicate that there was the smell of death in that area, although no body was found. Then there was a twist that I never saw coming. In November 2003, a truck was pulled over. It had stolen license plates. Officers spoke to the occupants of the vehicle and took their IDs, etc. to examine. Lo and behold, one female passenger inside the vehicle had identification stating that her name was Mary Day. All of the details on the ID were the exact same as missing Mary. They obviously interviewed her straight away, and she said she had been that Mary Day who vanished and she'd run away to escape abuse. Did they finally have Mary back? Now, something was off. Mary's accent was very different, which of course could have been because she'd lived elsewhere for so long, but her ID had also only just been issued. This person actually just assumed Mary's identity as a fake because of the news of the homicide investigation. There was only one thing for it: they needed to do a DNA test. And shockingly, results came back that she was a biological child of Charlotte. The investigation was closed and it was concluded that the new Mary was the original Mary. But the strange goings-on didn't end there. Now, Kathy and Sherry, the sisters, really doubted that she was Mary. Mary was really reluctant to speak of the past and explain what had gone on, and also seemed to not remember key events. Mary also started to behave very strangely. Some even wondered if she had a personality disorder. Then she sent an email claiming that she wasn't who she said she was. She really struggled with alcohol and even attempted self-unaliving and became violent. This caused huge issues between her and her sisters, and eventually she moved away. She sadly passed away in 2017 of cancer, and nobody even arranged a funeral for her. Let me know what you think. Was this real Mary, or was she an imposter?
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This guy, his name was Woo Young Ying.
Okay.
He was a experienced stuntman. What he would do is he would climb on top of these big ass towers, these light posts, these electricity towers, buildings, whatever, and he would do pull-ups off the side of the buildings, bro.
Is he like a stuntman for movies and stuff, or just a stuntman just for
Nah,
himself?
bro, for himself, bro. He would post the videos on social media and stuff, and he had over 300 videos doing this. So he was experienced, right? And then his last ever stunt was in China, which is his hometown, right? He needed money because he was gonna like propose to his girlfriend, and then his mom ended up getting sick as well, and he got offered $15,000 to do this one stunt. So he went to the building. It was 62 stories high.
Yo, my hands are already getting sweaty, bro. Thinking about it.
You could see him in the video. I'm gonna show you the video right now. In the beginning of the video, he starts wiping down the area. He's trying to make sure that everything is good, but
yeah, I remember seeing this
one
video,
pull-up,
bro.
2 pull-ups, and then the third one, he just starts looking down. Bro.
Yeah, that's so sad. I remember seeing that video. Look at my hands.
He was only 26 years old, but
me personally, I don't really get like the whole parkour like on the high buildings. I've been seeing videos of people doing that stuff. I'm like, yo,
They're
why?
bugging, right?
Why?
Tira a peruca dele. Tira mais. Casaco. Não, casaco. Tira a roupa. Tira o casaco. Pra poder mostrar a camisa. Tira o casaco, Pedro.
In 2019, Brazilian gang leader Clavino da Silva, otherwise known as Shorty, attempted to escape prison dressed as his 19-year-old daughter. So apparently on the day that he tried to escape, Shorty's 19-year-old daughter had been visiting him, and he had had this disguise smuggled in. So he literally just tried to walk out of the prison looking like this. But when the guards suspected something was up with this random woman that was trying to leave the prison, they got out their phones, started recording, and told the person that they needed to strip. And this is what led to that disturbing looking video that I played you a clip from at the beginning of this TikTok. Obviously, it was revealed that this was not a 19-year-old girl. It was a 42-year-old gang leader who was supposed to be serving a 73-year-long sentence. But this wasn't the end of the story for Shorty. You see, just a few days after this escape attempt, Shorty was found dead in his prison cell. Authorities afterwards claimed that Shorty had taken his own life. But in my opinion, I believe this might have been some sort of gang retaliation for the embarrassment that he put them through. I don't know, it is a pretty eerie disguise when you look at it. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts.
This one's been going viral recently too. It's about a cop that laughed at a woman being ran over. So back in January, there was a 23-year-old woman. Her name was Janavi Kandula. She was a master's student at Northeastern University. She was an international student. She came to study abroad to support her single mother back in India. And like this one night where she's just literally crossing the street and then she gets ran over by a cop, bro, going 74 miles per hour in the 25 zone, bro. She only had 3 months left for her to graduate. That's so sad. Her life was just taken in an instant, and all because of some dumb shit, bro. The cop who hit her, his name was Kevin Dave, and this motherfucker had like history of speeding tickets. He had his license suspended back in 2018, and now there was another cop. And his name was Daniel Otterer, and he's the vice president of the whole Seattle Police Guild, and he's basically just joking around, poking fun at it. And this motherfucker supposed to be the cop that's investigating the one who ran the girl over, bro.
I don't think she was thrown 40 feet either. I think she went up on the hood, hit the windshield, then when he hit the brakes, flew off the car. But she is dead. Yeah, just write a check. Yeah, $11,000. She was 26 anyway. She had limited value.
Limited value?
The guy literally was like, oh no, it was a misunderstanding.
That's fucking disturbing to hear, bro. The fact that a cop thinks that way, bro, is even worse. How the do people allow people like this to be cops, bro? Cops are...
This is one of the most mind-blowing injuries of all time.
Granny Keeley, an Irish woman, endured a life-changing car crash in 2006 when she was 22 years old at the time. She was the passenger in a car that skidded on black ice and collided with a wall. Granny's knees were then propelled into her face due to her feet being propped up on the dashboard. The impact occurred as the airbag inflated at a staggering speed of 200 miles per hour, resulting in very severe facial injuries. Almost every single bone in her face was broken and she suffered a brain leak, known as CSF leakage. Additionally, she lost 2 teeth in the traumatic accident. Following the crash, Granine underwent extensive medical procedures. Unfortunately, due to an infection, doctors had to remove her forehead, leaving her without one for 2 years. However, in 2009, surgeons managed to reconstruct her face by fitting her with a ceramic forehead. Granine humorously joked that her new forehead was made in Italy and playfully referred to it as a designer piece. This is Granine today, and she is now 38 years old, and it looks like she didn't even go through this awful experience. But sadly, she still suffers from long-lasting effects from the injury. She said, "I constantly lose my words while in the middle of a conversation. This can happen to me about 20 times a day." She also said, "I get headaches when too many people are talking around and I sometimes find it difficult to stay focused." So if you learn anything from this video, never ever put your feet on the dashboard of a car that you're in. Because you never know, this can happen to you.
I'm just gonna start from yesterday, and we'll just continue on from there. And I'm just gonna try to, give a timeline basically. So
the guy you just saw in that video is Tyler Andre Nichols III, otherwise known as T. Nichols. Now, Tyler was a rising star in the social media creation world. His YouTube channel was exploding, his Twitch was exploding, but people didn't know exactly what kind of a man he was yet. Well, in March of this year, T. Nichols was accused of smexting a minor, aka sending graphic materials and chats to one. The moderator was allegedly a 14-year-old girl on T. Nichols' Discord server. Here are some screenshots of the messages. And yeah, some of this stuff is extremely disturbing. Here's some more messages that he shared out, talking about flying out to meet minors. And all of these allegations got so much traction that T. Nichols actually had to respond to them. And what did he do? He took full responsibility for inappropriate actions with a minor. Now, in my opinion, when you act inappropriately with a minor, you should be removed from all social media platforms. That includes TikTok, YouTube, X. But no, T. Nichols is still up and he's still active on a lot of these platforms. And I don't know what it is when people get to a certain level of clout where they feel like, oh, now I can finally start messaging minors. It's just a really disturbing trend. And I will continue to expose these creeps until the day that I die. If you want to join me on this journey exposing corruption and pedophiles, go listen to my new podcast, The Conspiracy Files, available on all streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
However, coined the phrase, you can't make this stuff up, might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Basically, this was a real-life killer clown, bro. So Marlene Warren was the victim, right?
Okay.
So she had 2 kids. She was married before. Her husband ended up dying. Then she ended up marrying this guy named Michael Warren. Some time flies by and stuff. They kind of started getting a little distant from each other. A lot of arguments and And the thing that kind of like really separated them was the death of one of her kids. And it was a little weird because she would tell her mom, if something happens to me, I'm pretty sure it would be him. And then one day she's at home with her son, right? Out of nowhere, they hear a knock at the door and they see a white car outside. It's a white Chrysler. She answers the door. There's a clown standing outside.
Gosh, okay.
With balloons in the hands and flowers, right? The clown, all they do is hand her the balloons.
And they stand there?
Hand her the flowers. Out of nowhere, they pull out a gun, a small revolver, and shoot her in the face, bro. They walk to the car and they run. And then the son, he described the clown as a orange hair, red and white paint on their face, and like a full clown suit. Keep in mind the dad wasn't home.
So this already sounds kind of sus.
So they're investigating where the fuck he was, because yo, they had no evidence that the dad did it, bro. He literally had people and witnesses saying that
alibis,
he was at this spot doing this and that. But then they find a store literally a little bit away from the house. They say that a girl with gloves came in to buy flowers and the balloons. They also went to a costume shop where recently an orange wig and a clown costume was purchased, as well as red paint and white face paint, bro. 12 years later after that, they find out that he was having an affair.
Somebody else?
Her name was Sheila Keene. They get married, bro.
Who, the
Sheila Keene
and the husband?
So now the cops are like, what the fuck is happening, bro? I thought y'all said y'all didn't know.
Donald Trump was shot this afternoon at a political rally in Pennsylvania. As you can see right here, this was moments after the shots were fired. Now, we don't have all of the information right now, but obviously he is still alive. And the footage is absolutely disturbing. In the clip, you can hear multiple gunshots ring out. The audience starts screaming. Trump drops to the ground. He is covered quickly by the Secret Service agents. In the broadcast footage, he grasps his ears, so he may have been grazed by a bullet up there. Like I said, we don't have all the information. This is a developing story, but this isn't the first time that someone has tried to assassinate a president or former president. In 1912, an assassin attempted to end the life of Teddy Roosevelt as he was on the campaign trail. This man was former salon keeper John Schrank, and he would later claim that William McKinley's ghost had visited him in a dream and told him to avenge him for his assassination. Teddy Roosevelt, after being shot, continued with his speech, even as he profusely bled through the front of his shirt. And while he didn't end up getting elected that year, doctors at the time said that it was safer for him to keep the bullet inside his body than attempt to remove it. So for the rest of his life, he carried on with a bullet lodged in his chest. Then in 1981, someone attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan. This photo was actually taken just moments before the shots were fired. 3 people were injured in this attack, but nobody died. And obviously, as you guys probably already know, Ronald Reagan survived. He was in critical condition when he was rushed to the hospital, but nobody ended up passing away from this assassination attempt. The guy who did it was named John Hinckley Jr., and weirdly enough, he had been obsessed with actress Jodie Foster after watching the film Taxi Driver, and he claimed that he had carried out the assassination attempt in an attempt to impress her. And interestingly enough, he just signed a record deal last year and will be releasing a folk album soon.
sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanned across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
These are the most disturbing X-ray images, and this is a massive trigger warning.
This is Los Angeles builder Victor Benavides. And one day, he was repairing a roof when he fell backwards holding onto a nail gun. The nail gun then went off and shot a few nails randomly. Victor didn't feel anything at first, but suddenly his mouth started to fill up with a lot of blood. He then felt around his mouth with his tongue, and to his surprise, he noticed something metal in the roof of his mouth. He then got an x-ray, and the x-ray then revealed that a 3.5-inch nail had shot up into the roof of his mouth and embedded itself in his skull, missing his brain by a millimeter, which would have been fatal. The nail was extracted and Victor had no long-lasting health problems. And according to some sources, he is back at work and using the same exact nail gun. Can you imagine how lucky Victor had to feel? This nail missed his brain by a millimeter and would have easily ended his life if it missed his brain. This is absolutely crazy, but just wait for the next one. Next, in November 2008 in Australia, 2 boys were canoeing down the Georges River when they suddenly spotted a dead body. The 2 boys rushed home and told their parents, and they immediately called the police, and the body was then recovered. The dead man was Chen Lu, and his corpse had been tied up with electrical wire and wrapped in a carpet before being dumped in the river. He had been dead for around 12 days, and his body was extremely decomposed, especially since his body was in water for that long. An x-ray of his corpse revealed extremely disturbing injuries. Embedded in his face, neck, and skull were 34 nails, all shot from a high-powered nail gun. Looking at this image, I can't help but wonder what order the nails went in. How much time before each nail was shot? The first few nails were likely done as torture, and the rest was just the murderer finishing him off. And the crazy thing is, after 15 years, the killer who did this is still out there and quite possibly doing this to more people. This is just disturbing, and what an awful way to go.
This woman claimed that her 18-month-old daughter would become the next Jeffrey Dahmer and killed her because of it. I don't think that I've ever been more angry reading a true crime case. This is Cheyenne Hill. Police were called to Riley Children's Hospital in Indiana on November 23, 2022 after Cheyenne's daughter, 18-month-old Eliana, was admitted with horrific injuries. Eliana was severely malnourished and had a brain bleed, a broken collarbone, bruises on her face, and a swollen and deformed head. After seeing just how bad her injuries were, someone in Child Services notified authorities about Eliana's condition, which sparked an investigation into Cheyenne. While she was still hospitalized, Cheyenne told police that Eliana would become the next Jeffrey Dahmer, a serial killer who killed at least 17 men and boys starting in 1978. She went on to say that she believed her daughter was not a nice kid and that something wasn't right with her. When police asked her why she compared her 18-month-old to Jeffrey Dahmer, she laughed, and as Eliana lay there dying, Cheyenne called her an asshole. Sadly, just a few days later, little Eliana would die because of her injuries. Her death was ruled a homicide as a result of blunt force trauma to the head. Early on in the investigation, it came to light that a couple of witnesses noticed bruises and swelling on Eliana's face in the days leading up to her ultimate death. And on one occasion, a witness even told Cheyenne that she needed to be taken to the doctor. But Cheyenne snapped back at them and said, quote, "No. Under no circumstances are you to call an ambulance or take her to the hospital. I will make the decisions. That is my child." End quote. Cheyenne would eventually take her into the hospital, but not for another 8 days. Authorities also found that Cheyenne reportedly told a neighbor that Eliana was going to kill someone one day, and she also blamed Eliana as being the reason why her boyfriend wouldn't marry her. Even with all of this evidence, it would take nearly a year for Cheyenne to be arrested in connection to her daughter's death. During the trial, prosecutors couldn't prove that Cheyenne was the one who inflicted the injuries, but they were able to prove that Cheyenne neglected Eliana after the abuse. Cheyenne reportedly left Eliana in critical condition after the abuse and went to work, which is what ultimately led to her death. On Tuesday, Cheyenne was convicted of child neglect causing death and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. She showed no emotion or remorse in court. It's stories like this that anger me so much and make me realize that not everyone should be allowed to have kids.
This might be the worst pedophile in American history. This is 58-year-old Scott Allison from Kentucky. In 2021, authorities identified Scott as being one of the worst pedophiles on the internet. This account that the authorities had been tracking was posting some of the most vile, disturbing CP and CSAM that they had ever seen, depicting the abuse of children as young as 2 years old. Scott had usernames on 2 different dark web pedophile websites, where he regularly made posts talking to other pedophiles and posted some of his collection. When authorities finally got Scott's IP address and tracked him down to his house, they made an absolutely grim discovery. When authorities raided his home, they found a hard drive. And on that hard drive, authorities located over 130,000 images and videos depicting CP or CSAM. Let's just think about that for a second. 130,000 individual images and videos. Just imagine how many kids were victimized to get a collection that big. They also, after doing a forensic search of his computer, found that Scott had saved 108,000 posts and pages related to CP or CSAM on the dark web in saved searches on his computer. Scott, as it turns out, was one of the dark web's biggest pedo peddlers, and he was advertising all across the dark web that he had one of the biggest collections of CP that people could get access to pay him for. Thankfully, though, Scott did plead guilty, but unfortunately, it's not life in prison. This is not life in prison. It should be, but it isn't. Scott's sentence is probably going to be a minimum of 15 years, up to 30 years in prison, a large fine. But once again, that means with good behavior like we've seen with these creeps so many times, this guy can put his time in and then eventually rejoin society. I think that with these people, you literally just lock them up, throw away the key, that's it. But obviously our government doesn't see these crimes the same way that we do. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available to listen to for free on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts.
These are twisted murder cases you've never heard of, and this is a massive trigger warning.
This case takes place in Indonesia on May 12, 2016. Ino Ferrara was an 18-year-old woman who had recently graduated from a vocational school, and after graduation, she began working in an office of a plastics factory. The factory was some time away from her parents' home, but it did have accommodations for both men and women that was separated between genders. Ino lived in the company's accommodation just outside the factory, and every week she would return to her parents' house for a night or two and spend time with her family. Ino was the 4th of 7 children, and she and her family were followers of Islam. And because of this, she was arranged to be married to a man at some point.
However, in April 2016, Eno was walking back to her accommodations after a day at work when she bumped into a teenager who was referred to on the media as R.A. The two talked and exchanged numbers, and for the next month the two texted often and started somewhat of a relationship. At the time, R.A. was 16 and was a student at a neighboring high school. On May 12, 2016, Eno asked R.A. to come to her accommodation. She told him because of the arranged marriage, the month-long relationship had to come to an end, and the two decided to meet to say goodbye. At 11:30 that night, R.A. arrived at the women's section of the accommodation. Eno met him and at the gate let him in, and the two talked in her room. Inside, the two spoke for about 30 minutes and began to kiss, but before long, R.A. began to remove his clothes, but Eno told R.A. she had no interest in anything further. She was worried about the risk of getting pregnant and ignored his advances. Feeling angry and rejected, R.A. got dressed and left Eno's apartment. He then stood in the section between the female and male dormitories, and it's here where R.A. stumbled across two men, 24-year-old Ramad Hatano and 24-year-old Haman Hoparati. These two men worked at the plastics factory and stayed in the men's dormitory. The two men asked R.A. what he was doing, and he said he had been in a relationship with a woman who worked in the plastics factory, but the relationship had just come to an end. They all talked for a while, and the two men then wanted to see which factory worker was his girlfriend, and they then told him to take them to her room. There was a gate separating the girls' dormitories so nobody could get in, but R.A. didn't close it properly, so the three were able to get inside. The three then crept up to Eno's dormitory and twisted her door handle, and it was unlocked. The three then entered her room and stood over her as she slept. Ramad and Haman both recognized her from working with her. Haman had worked in the same section as Eno and had taken a liking to her. He even got her number from another worker and sent Eno messages, but Eno never replied to a message he sent. Ramad also knew who Eno was. He claimed that she called him ugly and that his skin was too dark. Iman then got one of the pillows off Eno's bed and placed it over her mouth and began to smother her. Eno then woke up and a struggle ensued. Iman then pulled a fork out of his pocket and began to stab Eno in the face multiple times, while Ramad pinned her down. The two men then ordered R.A. to grab a knife from the kitchen. However, he couldn't find one, so he went to the garden area and found a garden hoe. He came back to the room to see Iman still holding the pillow, which was now soaked with blood, over Eno's face. Iman then told R.A. to strike Eno in the face with the metal head of the hoe. R.A. then raised the hoe and struck Eno in the face once. This stunned her and she stopped resisting. Iman and Ramad then forced themselves upon Eno while R.A. stood guard by the door. After the two men were done, they told R.A. that it was his turn. He tried, but he wasn't able to. He would later say the blood coming from Eno's face turned him off, so instead he began to bite Eno's legs and breasts. Now, what I'm about to explain is absolutely sickening, and this is a massive, massive trigger warning. Ramad picked up the gardening hoe and inserted it into Eno's genitals. He then began to kick the metal head of the hoe, resulting in the handle impaling and rupturing Eno's internal organs, ending her life. 90% of the hoe handle had been kicked inside Eno. After killing her, the three took turns washing blood off their bodies. And before leaving the crime scene, they took Eno's things and phone and piled her clothes on top of her where her body was. They did this to mask the smell of decomposition that would happen in the next couple days. When Eno never turned up to work, her friends began to worry. They called her and texted her but didn't get a reply. They then went to her place and knocked, but when Eno didn't answer, they broke into the place. And once inside, they were met with a disturbing scene. Police were called, and Eno's body was taken away and an autopsy was conducted. The cause of death was from massive internal bleeding caused by the garden hoe. 23 inches of the handle had been kicked inside Eno, damaging her heart, lungs, and many other organs. You can see the x-ray photo of this on the internet, but I can't show it on here, and it's awfully disturbing. In a matter of days, all three boys were arrested and charged with the murder of Eno. All three boys had a reason to why they killed Eno also. R.A. claimed he did this because Eno rejected him and he didn't like the arranged marriage. Ramad said that Eno had been rude to him, and Iman said that she ignored his text messages. The police then forced the men to reenact the murder, which was televised, and the video of the reenactment could be found on YouTube, and it is super disturbing to watch. Both Iman and Ramad were found guilty and sentenced to death by firing squad. R.A. was also found guilty, but due to his age, he was only sentenced to 10 years in prison. I also have to warn you that if you research this case further, images of the crime scene are very easy to find and they are extremely disturbing. What these 3 boys did to Eno is just horrific, and I can't even imagine the fear and pain she must have been experiencing. May Eno rest in peace. You did not deserve this at all.
The Catholic Church said that it is overwhelmed with the amount of exorcism requests it's been receiving lately, and there's some pretty sad stories about it. The article says that exorcists in Rome have been seeing up to 30 to 50 cases per day, and that includes the story of this young woman who was in a church where she started having a meltdown. She was jumping over pews and she even assaulted a monk. Her father claimed that she was having a mental health crisis, but her mother said that she was possessed. The priest ended up siding with the mother and performed a 9-hour exorcism on the girl, which he claimed was successful. The church claims it's able to distinguish between mental health and demonic possession, saying that demonic possession usually includes symptoms such as unusual strength or being able to speak ancient languages without previously knowing them. But what do you think? Is this a mishandling of a mental health epidemic, or is it something supernatural?
Watch these to find out they might get life in prison.
What they call felony murder, while in the perpetration or attempted perpetration of child abuse in the first degree, they're alleging that you murdered one Mary Welch. That is a charge called homicide felony murder. It is life without parole. It requires a DNA sample to be taken upon arrest, which is often like a cotton swab or in the inside of your cheek. The second offense that you're both charged with is called child abuse in the first degree, where they're alleging you knowingly or intentionally caused serious physical harm to a child. They're talking about this Mary Welch. It is a felony, possible penalty of up to life imprisonment or any term of years less than life. Now those are the 2 separate felony charges.
This is the scary story about the lunch lady. There was a lunch lady named Judy, and everybody in the school loved her. But they loved her food even more. Every single day they would all run to the lunchroom just to eat her delicious food. But one day, a young boy in 7th grade noticed something extremely strange. In the back of the kitchen, he saw a mysterious door he never seen before. And he's been buying lunch every single day for a year straight. He then went to the principal's office and told him what he saw. The principal then made his way down to the lunchroom and asked Judy about the door. She played dumb for a couple minutes, but eventually ended up showing him. And what he saw inside made him freeze in complete horror. Inside were multiple children's dead bodies, completely cut up and strung up on the wall like animals. Judy then looked at the principal with a smile on her face and said, "How do you think my food tastes so good?" This is the reason why. Judy was then arrested and fired. Judy is now serving 105 years in prison. But the crazy part is, how did this school allow a lunch lady to kill all these students and then sell their meat as lunch food?
2 other 10-year-olds I don't even know kidnapped, tortured, and murdered me. My name is James Patrick Bulger. I was 2 years old and died on February 12, 1983. My mother, Denise Fergus, and I were out shopping that day. While we were in the aisles of a store, my mother let go of my hand for a very brief moment. Due to a slight lack of attention on her part, she noticed that I had disappeared. Then our 2 10-year-olds, Robert Thompson and John Venables, came up to me and took me by the hand. Because of my young age, I didn't understand what was happening. Several people must have seen the scene, but no one reacted when I was kidnapped. They took me to a railroad track where there was no one around. They started beating me and allowed all the atrocities they did to me. They threw bricks and rocks at me. They also hit me on the head with an iron bar. And worst of all, they put batteries in my mouth. Then they asked me to undress so they could hit my private parts and inserted objects into my anus. After they'd finished playing with me, they placed me on the railroad tracks so that a train would run over me and make it all look like an accident. The 2 boys who assaulted me were convicted of murder in 1993 and sentenced to indefinite detention. They were released under new identities as adults. Do you think their judgments were correct?
This woman vanished on a yoga retreat, and this eerie image is the last known photo of her. On the 19th of October 2023, Nancy Ng was at a yoga retreat. Nancy is 29 years old from California and had been at the retreat at Lake Atilan in Guatemala. On the day in question, she disappeared while taking a kayaking trip with some others from the retreat. Nancy and another person who was at the retreat broke away from the group and began paddling about a mile into the lake. The woman that she was with is the last known person to have seen Nancy. The woman in question has spoken out through her attorney, stating that they happened upon each other while they were in the lake and began to chat to each other. While out in the water, she said that Nancy decided she wanted to go swimming. She claims that she tried to stop Nancy doing this due to the rough nature of the water and the current. The woman states that Nancy ignored her warnings and got into the water and managed to push her kayak away. This woman states that she tried to retrieve the kayak by keeping one leg in her boat and another in the other kayak. She said she got close to the swimmer and managed to push it back to her. She said she then actually lost the kayak again, and after turning around to try and get it, Nancy was apparently gone. She claims that she went to go and get help and a distress call was put out. Search and rescue teams have unfortunately had no luck in finding the missing woman. What this man did to the mother of his unborn baby is truly horrific. Vanessa Pierre was 29 years old and expecting a baby girl. She was 6 months pregnant and had even picked out a name for her baby daughter. Her life was looking exciting until a horrific event on the 23rd of October 2020. It was 2:50 a.m. and Vanessa was in the car with her boyfriend Goey Charles. Now he is currently 33 years old, and as the pair were travelling in the white Dodge Challenger, he suddenly pulled over. They were on the side of the Horace Harding Expressway in Queens, New York. Now, it's unknown what went on in the car for the next 40 minutes, but he got out of the driver's seat after that and into the back seat with Vanessa. Horrifically, he callously strangled the mother of his unborn baby to death. He stayed in the back seat with Vanessa's body for around an hour, and just after 4:30 a.m, he got out the car and dumped her lifeless body by the roadside. She was left there with a pair of grey tracksuit bottoms around her neck. It was around 6 a.m. that morning that a bus driver noticed Vanessa's body on the side of the road. Emergency services raced to the scene, but she was pronounced dead. Her murder was captured on CCTV footage, helping bring her killer to justice. Shockingly, in the US, almost 20 people are abused by a partner per minute. Goey was charged with second-degree murder and is due to be sentenced at the end of this month. He could get 25 years in prison.
Mysteriously died in my...
This is the Mr. Hands video, one of the hardest videos to watch on the internet, explained. The Mr. Hands video took place on July 2nd, 2005. It happened on a 40-acre farm in Washington. Kenneth Pinion and James Michael Tate lived right next to the farm in a trailer park and often visited the farm to engage in sexual intercourse with the horses inside. On the night of July 2nd, 2005, Kenneth Pinion and James Michael Tate and an unidentified man snuck into the farm to engage in their zoophilia. And much like their previous experiences, they went on to film this event. The video is short and it's around 40 seconds long. The video opens up in a very dark barn. You see a man with his pants down bending over, and next to him you see a very large horse. You then see another man in the shot moving the horse closer to the man bending over.
He successfully does this and the horse walks further into the shot, and at this point you see the horse has a massive erection. I could assume you know where this is going, and I doubt you guys need me to explain it, but I will anyway. At this point in the video, the man in the shot grabs the horse's you-know-what and guides it into Kenneth Pinion's butt. And once the horse's you-know-what lined up with Kenneth's butt, it proceeds to pump away. It only took 2 or 3 pumps and the horse was done. This video will make you physically ill. The noises are just extremely uneasy to listen to. Of course you hear Kenneth Pinion grunt in pain after each thrust, but you also hear the noises of the horse doing its thing. It's just honestly extremely messed up, and once the horse finishes, that's where the video ends. But it's not where the story ends. Unlike the previous times these men did this, they soon realized something was wrong with Kenneth Pinion. At first, Kenneth did not want to go to the hospital due to the embarrassing nature of his injury. However, things took a turn and Kenneth was dropped off anonymously at the hospital. The man who brought him told the hospital staff he needed assistance and he then disappeared. Kenneth Pinion was then found dead in the emergency room at 45 years old. And his cause of death was said to be due to a perforated colon. Nobody knows how this video got leaked, but people suspect it was either Michael James Tate who recorded the video or law enforcement. I really don't recommend watching this video because, as I said earlier, it will literally just make you feel physically ill. Many people watch this video and record their reactions to see if they could finish it. But trust me, you don't want to see this. Hopefully the explanation was enough to drive your curiosity away.
Mommy, please take me home. The last words Judah Morgan ever said to his foster mother. The next time she saw him, he was in a coffin. Jenna Hullett loved Judah like he was one of her own children, and she applied for custody of him at just 4 months old. Judah had been placed in foster care shortly after birth as he'd been born with the marijuana drug THC in his system. Jenna was the cousin of Judah's father, and she had a stable, loving home to provide for him, so she was granted custody, and he absolutely thrived in her care. The whole family absolutely loved Judah to bits, and he couldn't have been happier. However, when Judah was just 3 years old, he was ordered by Child Services to be placed back in the care of his biological parents, Mary and Alan. Judah had absolutely no idea that when he visited his parents that day, that he wouldn't be returning home with Jenna, and he begged her to take him with her. There was absolutely nothing that Jenna could do, and just 6 months later, little Judah was murdered by his parents after being starved and abused. Mary and Alan had forbidden Jenna from ever seeing Judah again, and they often kept him locked up in their cold, dark basement. On October 21st, 2021, 911 received a call from Mary, saying that Alan had got angry and hurt Judah. When emergency services arrived, they found Judah on the floor of one of the bedrooms wrapped in a blanket. He was battered and bruised, and it was clear to see that he'd been starved and abused for months. His cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Police actually managed to recover surveillance footage from inside the home, showing Alan abusing Judah on multiple occasions. He was seen on one occasion punching Judah 14 times, before lifting him up by the neck and dropping him on the floor. The next day he was again seen punching an already battered and bruised Judah 17 times. The couple were also seen leading Judah down into the basement before locking the door and leaving the house, and then arriving hours later and letting Judah back out of the basement. Alan and Mary were both arrested, and Alan pleaded guilty to the murder of Judah. He was sentenced in November 2022 to 70 years in prison. Mary is yet to be sentenced. Judah's loving foster family were present at the sentencing, and although nothing can ever bring Judah back, they are satisfied that his killer will likely die behind bars. Jenna is now advocating